1001 things to do, 15 minutes to go. I gotta shower, gotta shave, and I gotta get dressed, and gotta put away all my dough. Had a meeting in Manhattan at 4:45. Got stuck in traffic, but I made it home alive, so I can stop. Cause Shabbos is here. It's 25 hours to me, a very dear. I'm gonna drop all the things on my mind, put it aside for another day.
Hello everyone, now I want to talk about a very sensitive time, and that is Friday night. Friday night, coming to shul on time is very difficult because on the one hand, we want to daven mincha on time, but on the other hand, there's a lot of pre-Shabbos preparations, and I'm sure you know it, that shuls somehow are filled by Baruch Hu, but not as filled at mincha. And the question is, what do you do on a Friday night? Because as I said in the last time, there is a monkey wrench Friday night that we don't have all week, called Tosefet Shabbos. The Gemara in Meseches Rosh Hashanah, Daf Tet Amud Bet, says that there is a din called Tosefet Shabbos, learned out from Sukkim, that basically means we detract a little from Friday and we add to Shabbos. If Shabbos is supposed to be 24 hours, it's always more because of the law of Tosefet Shabbos. So, by example, if Shabbos is supposed to start at sunset, because from sunset till darkness it's twilight, it may be day, it may be night, it may be Shabbos, it may be Friday, we have to start Shabbos a little before sunset, and that's called Tosefet Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch paskins this, and even though he says Yesh Omrim shetzarich leosif michol ala kodesh, some say there's a din of Tosefet Shabbos. He doesn't bring a dissenting opinion, and I believe he said that simply because the Rambam didn't hold from this except for on Yom Kippur. In any case, we do hold from it, and the question is, what do we do with mincha? Can you daven mincha when you're supposed to already accept Shabbos? So on the one hand, you're before sunset, and that is a good time to daven mincha. On the other hand, you have a din called Tosefet Shabbos. You get to shul 5 minutes before sunset, or 3 minutes before sunset, or at sunset itself. What should you do? In my humble opinion, this will be dependent upon how do we understand the law, not of davening, but of Tosefet Shabbos. And here we come to a machlokas rishonim as to how to understand it. The Tosfos seems to bring two opinions on this in two different places. In Meseches Ketubos, Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, he says that Shehu Kiyom Tov Li'inyan Melacha. In other words, it's like Yantiv already when it comes to not doing Melacha. But even though that's the case, it doesn't turn Friday into Shabbos. So on the one hand, you're not going to do Malacha, you're not put on a light. But on the other hand, it's still Friday. You can probably still daven mincha. In a different Tosfos, he actually comes along and says regarding another Tosefet, and that's Tosefet Shvi'it, the adding on to the Shemitah year, Shahashvi'it matchelet mishana hashishit, v'chol din Shvi'it yihiyeh la shishit. In other words, when it comes to Tosefet, Shemitah, what we detract from the 6th year becomes Shemitah for lock, stock, and barrel. Namely, it is totally and utterly like Shemitah. So does that basically means that Friday night, whenever Tosefet Shabbos begins, it becomes Friday night, and therefore you couldn't daven mincha at that time. It's no longer Friday, it's already Shabbos. So how do we paskin on this question? It seems to be a machlokas even in the poskim. The Rashal was famous in saying that even if you accept Shabbos early, you can't have your meal early, because accepting Shabbos early or Yontiv early only means Isurei Melacha, and therefore you have to wait till night in order to make Kiddush and have your meal. And the Taz disagrees. The Taz comes along and says, no, actually, it totally becomes like Shabbos or like Yontif, and you can ultimately treat it that way even though the sun is still shining outside. Obviously, the Rashal would say you could daven mincha because it's only a Tosefet with regard to Malacha. It doesn't turn Friday into Shabbos, but according to the Taz, it does, and therefore you would not be able to daven mincha. So, that being the case, what do we do in our situation? You all know that we paskin that if you do an early Shabbos, the Shulchan Aruch says that you can go ahead and make Kiddush and have your meal, and you can do all this before the sun even sets. Mishnah Berurah also paskins this way, but does bring the descending opinion saying Yesh Cholkin, and maybe you should eat a kazayit at night. But he ultimately paskins this way as well, namely that you can not only receive Shabbos early, but you can eat your meal early and even finish your meal before the sun sets. Since we paskin that way, then obviously we paskin that you turn Friday into Shabbos. And since that's the way we paskin, I believe that if on Friday night you indeed come to shul and it's getting very close to Shkia, you should not on a Friday night, I repeat, should not daven Mincha 3 minutes before the Shkia, because you will not make it. Either you won't finish Mincha before sunset, less of a problem, but more importantly, you won't do the din of Tosefet Shabbos. Tosefet Shabbos means it's totally Friday night and no longer the time to daven any prayers of Friday. From this perspective, allow me to quote from Rav Soloveitchik as recorded by Rav Hershel Shechter. And I quote, "Da'afta min haga'olam hu la'akel k'divrei harama, even though the Jewish people have accepted the Ramah that you can daven Mincha on a weekday up until darkness, that's only weekdays. But not on the eve of Shabbos. Any way you slice it, there's a din of Tosefet Shabbos, and that means everything. And therefore, Mimele, Pashita, Shasuli Palel Tfilat Chol, Shabbat. And therefore it's absolutely clear that you cannot daven a weekday davening, namely a Friday davening, when Tosefet Shabbos already kicked in. So to sum up, if you're going to daven Mincha very close to sunset on a Friday night, you're going to miss the din of Tosefet Shabbos. And you shouldn't. There is a way out, and that is to daven Ma'ariv twice. The Shulchan Aruch paskins, you already accepted Shabbos, namely you did your Tosefet Shabbos, or you said Baruch Hu, whatever it might be. You already accepted Shabbos. So to sum up, on a Friday night, if you come late to shul and it's very close to sunset, you should forego Mincha, you should accept Shabbos, and daven Ma'ariv twice in order to fulfill the din of Tosefet Shabbos on the one hand, and also Mincha by virtue of davening Ma'ariv twice. Obviously, the better idea is come to shul on time. And if you come to shul on time, you'll daven Mincha, then you'll do the din of Tosefet Shabbos, and your timeline will not in any which way be impinged.